Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. It is day 3 of Autodesk University this year, and I am fired up. We are just starting the morning. We are in the expo. It is closed right now, so we will be delightfully blasted with all the sounds and all the other fun things in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But we will power through because we're going to have a really fun conversation about innovation and technology and predictability in the construction industry, which I'm really excited about. And to help tell that story today, I am joined by Tim Gaylord, the Director of Innovation with DPR, and Atul, Khanzode, the Chief Technology also with DPR. So, gentlemen, how are you both doing today?
Great. Nice to be here, Eric, and thanks for having us on the podcast.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Tim, how you doing? You fired up?
Oh, I'm fired up. We're in the last day of Autodesk University, so yeah, let's finish it out strong.
I appreciate you guys joining me to bring the energy and the noise to AU for the third day. As I mentioned a minute ago, we're going to deep dive on some great themes on innovation and just really the emphasis of predictability and decision making in construction. And so, Atul, I've got the first question I'd like to throw your way. So when we last spoke, a theme that kept coming up was that predictability message. And so, to start us off, could you highlight some of the least predictable areas in construction and how that lack of predictability impacts a project?
A great question. If you look at construction is all about sort of integration. And what owners really want is predictability in cost, schedule, and quality. And who are the most responsible for the cost, schedule, and quality are the builders, the general contractor, the subcontractors. And the biggest cause, at least from my perspective, of lack of predictability is not having those people involved early in the design process, which adds to a lot of missed opportunities to incorporate their knowledge into the completing design to be buildable, and that's where predictability happens. There's obviously other causes these days, especially related to supply chain disruptions and other things. But not having the right people involved at the right time is really the biggest cause, from my opinion.
I love that theme, and I'm hearing it more and more often, and just the importance of pre-construction and really creating an opportunity to have that feedback loop. Because, if we look at some of our traditional delivery methods, we have our design, bid, build, and we operate, and we have all of these RFIs and change orders and all these things that come up because that feedback loop didn't exist and folks weren't able to share their expertise at the moment that it would have had the most impact. I mean, if you think about, a steel detailer, for example, they have a lot of perspective and opinions and such that they can introduce earlier in the conversation. And so it's really cool to hear that you're thinking about that.
Yeah.
Tim, I'd love to hear your thoughts there on predictability and, the construction industry. Any other areas that you consider challenging when, you're facing a lack of predictability?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about a construction project, there are just 1,000 moving parts, and depending from supply chain to shortage of skilled labor to weather, right? I mean, there's so many unforeseens, and so being able to be adaptable is key, and that's why I think our group exists, right? To help find these solutions to help us quickly overcome, quickly adapt, and make sure we can overcome any challenge or unforeseen obstacle or unpredictable obstacle that comes our way.
I feel like construction is such an interesting opportunity for us to find ways to be adaptable. And I don't know if I can think of many other industries that have to be able to think on their feet so regularly as projects unfold, as you just pointed out. And, even just something as simple as weather, which continues to become even more increasingly chaotic, you could feel, fairly comfortable predicting what a summer might be like. But, we're all on the West Coast, or at least Tool and I are on the West Coast. And, we've got fire season now and all these other things that, weren't even really in our lexicon 5 years ago. And so it's it's just an increasingly changing landscape. And I'm encouraged and excited to hear more from both of you on just finding ways to find more predictability within our projects, but also, what innovative things we can do. And Tim, I think this speaks right up to your alley on, finding that predictable nature within the construction industry. And so, Tim, leaning into that directly, what are some of these main hurdles what are some of these hurdles to bringing more predictability or certainty to the work our teams are doing? Like, what are the blockers right now?
Yeah, I mean, a big hurdle that our team faces, I know, is just around adoption of new solutions and innovating. I mean, our project teams right now, I think more than ever, are being asked to deliver projects faster while still maintaining high levels of quality, high standards of safety, right? And so with these tight margins, tight schedules, it's hard to be asked to try something new when they have these high expectations to deliver. So, it's a lot of what our team tries to do is be that support structure to help teams test out things, because usually there's a learning curve. Usually there's bugs that still need to be figured out, and it's not always an immediate return, an immediate improvement, trying new things to overcome supply chain issues or overcome a labor shortage. So that's really what we're in place to do, is to help overcome those initial struggles of trying something new. And that's the biggest hurdle, and overcoming that employee hesitance, and really supporting the team to try something out, document, make sure we're not innovating in a silo.
Yeah, I love how you point out the need to do this alongside our day job. And that's a real challenge. I mean, if you think about it, with labor challenges and shortages and the continually compressed schedules, with the expectations of delivery remaining the same, it creates a very unique but very challenging situation for us to implement this. And I can understand when somebody has some pushback where they go, I'm just trying to do my job and you're trying to give me a new thing. Even if the intention with that new thing you're handing them is to make that better, it's still some work to get there. And I have tremendous empathy for that. Your team, as you've so clearly pointed out in some of our earlier conversations as well, is there to do exactly that. And there's so much communication that's tied to that, and there's so much trust that you have to establish with your teams to make sure that they know that when you bring something to them, it has their best interests or the organization's best interest in mind. And it's not just because, you really like technology and so you go, let's see if we can get this new thing in. I mean, maybe that happens sometimes, but for the most part, there's going to be a lot of intent behind that. And I think you have to continue communicating that and working through it. So Atul, I know you're pretty into integrated project delivery. We've talked about that before. You've written some books on it, and I'm really excited to talk about that a bit more. Can you share, including maybe some IPD thoughts, some of the methods that you've seen successful that really do bring that predictability to our projects? Like what can people do, whether it's large or small, that, offer some more certainty to make us, confident in circumstances and situations?
Yeah, so I'll mention two things. One is bringing the right key players as early as you can on a construction project, during even the design phase. And then, like Tim mentioned, utilizing, methods like virtual design and construction, like a LOD 400, 500, BIM, to resolve all the issues, incorporate their knowledge into that, into the coordination process, so that you have that opportunity to really knock it out of the park during construction.
Yeah.
Those two methods. And I think there's a few other things that we have experienced in terms of providing incentives for collaboration to the players that you bring in, utilizing the lean construction methods from a process perspective. So there's a variety of things, but I think those are the things that I would mention.
And I love your mention of lean construction here too, because it's such a strong tool for our teams as they start thinking through how they can apply that. I had a wonderful conversation with Ariana Alviar from Bolt Company a while back, and she is very focused on just bringing lean methodologies into her projects. And we have so much we can learn from our friends in the manufacturing space. And obviously, manufacturing and construction are not one-to-one. There are very different environments. The site conditions are differing.
Yeah.
But I think as we increase, the usage of either modular construction or offsite prefabrication or a variation of these, we can add more certainty, as you're alluding to here. And I think the lean methodologies that, we're starting to see more and more often discussed in construction are likely a good starting point for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been practitioners of lean for a while. And I think one of the things you mentioned, I think our industry is going to continue to face the lack of skilled labor workforce. And like you said, the pressures on the project teams is not reducing. The owner is going to demand the same type of performance. So the only way to do a lot of this is to bring those sort of that manufacturing thinking into the construction process. And we are seeing a lot of experimentation that we are doing, others are doing in terms of modularization, both volumetric modularization plus flat walls, for example, we are doing, and that's only going to increase. And I think it's for the right reason, for basically delivering those predictability that the owner wants.
Yeah, and it adds that element of safety as we're able to control so much more about that process. You have less folks on site. There's so many layers of exploring these innovative methods, and I feel people are also starting to be more accepting of them as well, because I know there's been hesitancy for a long time, especially early on, where they go, okay, maybe we can prefab our casework or use modular or something later, and they weren't really thinking broader about the scope of the project. And I think we've kind of turned that upside down in the last 3 to 4 years as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the key enabler, again, from my perspective, is I think what I think a lot of folks in manufacturing call like the design for manufacturing and assembly. So you have to bring that sort of component-based or modular sort of design thinking into the process. And a lot of our design partners that we talk to are already sort of thinking about that and really trying to incorporate that into the process so that they can enable a lot of those things to happen. So it's really good to see when we sort of see that on projects.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're trying to think through that when construction's already started, you're very much thinking about it too late.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to your early point of just that 360 feedback loop and getting the players involved earlier. And I think also, just helping our owners understand some of these choices sooner as well. And I think the relationships with, serial builders and the contractors they work with are increasingly important, because there's so much knowledge sharing there. And also it just really empowers the owner to have so much more information at their fingertips when they've built out their processes and they've thought through the tools that they want to use to offer more certainty and visibility. And, obviously the owners want predictability and knowing when the project's going to wrap up, and so they can start having their tenants occupy the space. And so it's a lot of moving parts, but I think the tools that we have available now have put us in a really fantastic position.
Yeah, I used to say that I think the tools were a limiting factor, like 6-7 years ago. I don't think tools are a limiting factor anymore. I think it's our ability to design an organization where we could use them at their full potential, and then a process that really would deliver results. So I really, believe that I think, the technology is sort of, democratized over the last few years.
Yeah, it's no longer just the VDC team that's empowered to use technology, and that's, I think, an exciting pivot, because now everybody has the chance to improve their workflows or have more access to data, especially to inform the decisions they make instead of using fully gut feel. There's so much to be said there. So Tim, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on introducing more predictability into these projects as well. Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve that Atul hasn't mentioned already?
Point tricks up my sleeve. No, I mean, really what our team focuses mainly on is first identifying what challenges the team is going through. There's so much new technology coming out, right? So many solutions coming out. You can easily get distracted, I think.
Oh yeah, shiny new toy syndrome is what I call it.
Yeah,
There's so many things
absolutely.
out
So
there.
it's not a trick. It's pretty straightforward. It's just, hey, first focus on your challenges, and there's plenty of solutions out there to follow, and we can match the correct solution to the problem. But if we don't have a good grip on that, then it's easy to get distracted instead of leveraging the tools like the tool's saying.
You're so spot on here too, because I think, especially as we've had this uptick in tools made for our industry where we didn't for so long, or the tools didn't really meet the needs that we had and the expectations we had, it was easy to just start grabbing stuff and go, okay, let's add this to our tech stack. Let's add this to our tech stack. And then suddenly you step back and you go, did these integrate? Are we able to move our data through? Did we align on a platform? All of these things. And you have to have this very intentional plan for why before you just start grabbing stuff, because otherwise, maybe the drones that you brought to your project are interesting and cool, but have you incorporated them into a workflow that is helpful, or is this a burden because now somebody has to go do this on top of their existing work? So you're spot on there. I think that's a really fantastic point. And Atul, I want to come back to IPD because I'm a big IPD nerd, and I know that it's a contentious topic at times. Sometimes folks are very eager to embrace it and they think there's value. Some look at that and go, what do you mean I'm going to give all of my or be fully transparent and everything, and we're going to share in wins and losses? It's a mindset, but I'd love to hear more about how you found success when using this delivery method on past projects, and especially how you've convinced the broader project team to work in such a uniquely collaborative environment. Like, how do you get people fired up for IPD?
So, we have been lucky because, we work in a couple core markets where the owners have embraced this method of project delivery.
And that makes sense. Like, if the owner's not on board, you're not going anywhere.
You're not going anywhere. And I think, so Sutter Health, for example, across the board adopted sort of the lean IPD method, many years ago. They said in their $6 billion program, even if they can squeeze out a 10% cost, that would basically help them achieve more. And we were beneficiaries of that. And I think fundamentally, people in construction want to do good work. They want to collaborate. But I think, and what I believe IPD does, it sets those conditions for collaboration. It's still not easy. You have to convince people that, typically they make money by hiding things, and IPD fundamentally requires you, like you said, being transparent. So it's hard. It's hard for our people. It's hard for the subs. It's hard for the designers. But I can tell you an anecdote I'd like to share. One of the largest kind of IPD project that I was part of, everyone on that project was very, very skeptical at the beginning. We had this big room. People were, reluctant to get in there. But they eventually did. And we used to do these surveys every month, just to get the pulse of the project. Started off very skeptical, but by the end of the project, people were extremely happy that they had an opportunity to participate because the project was so successful. Nobody was suing each other. They were able to contribute sort of what they brought to the table, and that was appreciated and all that. From my perspective, I'm still surprised that it hasn't taken on as much as it should. And there are a variety of reasons. Public contracting agencies have a hard time changing the model, through the legislative process, all that. But I think the benefit that you can get by even other contractual methods, by providing incentives, bringing people on earlier, utilizing things like target value design process, we have proven that I think you don't need a integrated form of agreement to deliver those results, but take some of those elements from the IPD concepts and still bring them onto your project, and you can still have a very successful project.
I love that overview there, and I hope everybody out there listening, internalizes that. Like, you've used this very successfully on some very large and impactful projects, and once you get past that early stage of hesitation or skepticism, if somebody is in that area, it feels like you continue to show, okay, this transparency has some value for your team. And once you build that core team, like, say, obviously hospitals are very serial builders. You get to do that over and over and over again, and hopefully bring those same players along, and you're already set up, you already understand the nuances, and there's a lot less overhead to get everything spun up, and I think you can build on it. So I'm encouraged by it, and I hope we continue to see more adoption of it, even if, as you just alluded to, people using those values even without a fully formal agreement. I think there's a mindset that comes with IPD and other integrated project delivery type approaches that bring tremendous value to the construction industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think fundamentally, Eric, what I believe is, I think our industry, the contractual structures in our industry are designed to push the risk down to the sort of the the person that can least sort of afford to handle it, push it down. And fundamentally what IPD does is sort of brings people together, risk is going to be there. We talked about uncertainty, we talked about unpredictability. So our industry is risky, it's unpredictable. So what you want is all the minds you can get working on the problem to solve it, rather than push it off to the person that can least handle it. And that's what fundamentally sort of what IPD does. And again, I think I'm hopeful that for at least the complex projects, we can really adopt this method.
I appreciate you pointing that out too, because unfortunately, some of the more traditional delivery methods are, let's say, contentious. To put it politely, the risk rolls downhill in such a, let's be real, not a very fair fashion. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to change that model as best we can, because I think that's also a blocker for people starting new, specialty contractor businesses and such. When you look at this, you have there's a lot of risk, and if things don't go well, unfortunately, in that traditional model, sometimes things don't end in a very fair way, or a way that feels particularly good. And I think we can be more equitable about how we manage our contracts and how we share the risk amongst our projects. And I think especially as uncertainty seems to be increasing in a more broad way, that's the more fair approach to tackling our projects, even if sometimes it's easier to people want to protect their bottom line. I understand and empathize with that. But also, I think we have to think about the greater good of the project and the owner that you're serving at the same time.
Yeah, and I think, not just the greater good of the owner, but I think we also need to think about our industry. Our industry is not attracting the kind of talent that we do need to attract. And you think about it, I think, I was talking with our safety professional, and our industry has the highest rate of anxiety, suicides, things like that. And I think people don't prefer to come join the industry. But fundamentally, we love construction. For those who love construction, if you surround them with a collaborative environment where they feel like their knowledge is considered, they can contribute, bring their whole self to it, is just a much better outcome. And I'm really hopeful that I think more owners adopt IPD or IPD-light approaches that allow that sort of team chemistry and team collaboration to happen, where we can attract more people, because it is really a very fulfilling thing to do when you see something that you were participating in that gets built, and you can point to the societal value that it adds.
You've touched on so many topics that I feel like we could have another 2 or 3 hour conversation here, but I appreciate you mentioning all of them, because you are right. The folks that work in construction, even despite the challenges and some of the stress, the pressure that's tied to delivering these incredible facilities on the timelines that we need to support those that are going to be using them, that stress is considerable. And I feel like we're starting to talk about the mental health piece in a much more meaningful way than we ever have historically. And I'm thankful that you've mentioned here too, and I've had another conversation this week about that very specifically. But if we're not taking good care of our people, and if we're not talking about some of those unfortunate statistics as far as anxiety and rates of suicide in construction, and how much higher they are than other industries, we're not in a position to correct those. And I just want to take a moment here too. If you're feeling this anxiety, you're out there listening, or if you're feeling stressed, there are resources, there are things that can help you. And so please, reach out and find somebody to bring those resources, to your attention, because you're not alone as far as, the stress and the anxiety. And it's okay to feel this way. And I just want to point that out really quickly before, we jump back into innovation and technology. But I thank you bringing it up, because it is something we have to continue talking about, because it's a piece of this broader conversation. And it's our people are the most important thing on the site. And we think about safety, we talk about safety all day long. Mental health is such a contributor to safety and just overall wellness and the success of our industry and our project. It's a business conversation, in addition to it being a humanity, a person conversation as well.
No, absolutely, Eric. You touched upon something that's really, really near and dear to my heart, and a lot of people. One of the plugs that I would make that the industry has started, a few years ago, is this Construction Inclusion Week, where we celebrate sort of inclusivity, really, bringing people in, talking about topics like this. So, absolutely. I think it's great to see the focus on it in the recent past.
We're starting to put in the work, and it's going to pay off. And there's a lot of work left to do.
Yeah.
So I think we'll continue moving the industry forward. But Tim, I'm gonna pivot back to innovation and technology today, since that's what brought us here today. And I've got a question for you. So we've talked a little bit about this, but I'd love it if you could talk about DPR's approach to technology deployment, and how that does impact your predictability and incomes, and more specifically improving your decision making. Like, tell me about that rollout process. What does it look like?
Even before the rollout process, I want to go back to first identifying the challenge or the opportunity, right? If we're not, I think a while back we did focus more on solutions based, kind of like the Wild West, just trying anything and everything, and we really wanted to change that framework of saying, okay, we need to understand where's the biggest opportunity for improvement, where's the biggest hurdle right now, so we're not being distracted. And once we do that, we can then look at some areas around improving or tracking impact. And I want to say impact instead of ROI, because I think when I use ROI, people will immediately think of financial returns. And yes, we always want to improve financial returns, but we also want to look at things like well-being, experience, right? Tracking productivity, quality, safety, but the overall experience, is it making our project teams healthier and easier? And once we do that, we can use this kind of baseline. Okay, we're looking at a certain process or a certain tool. What is the baseline right now? Where are we at with productivity? Where are we at with safety? Where are we at with the overall experience for our project teams? And once we have that baseline, we can then look at the new solution and how it improves these different areas, and set some success criteria for, okay, does it improve productivity in this specific way? Does it improve sustainability, make our projects more sustainable, make our project teams more sustainable? Does it make them happier? Does it make their lives more efficient, easier, get them home to their families at night, right? So we really want to identify the opportunity, identify the challenge, understand these success metrics, but in parallel look at scaling issues, right? Because once we validate a solution, we can easily validate it on one project or two, but this kind of like middle stage when we're scaling up, that's the hardest part, I think, of adoption and deployment, because what works on one project may not work on another. What works in one region may not work in another because of local regulations or laws there, or just the different types of projects, scopes, and sizes. Also, a lot around cybersecurity. Do they have a cybersecurity kind of game plan? If they're new and just starting out, can they handle the massive data load from a company the size of DPR, right? If we rolled it out to every single project. So all these things we need to consider before we even talk about scaling, and that takes a lot of time, and that can be frustrating for some folks. Is that sometimes we want to go and deploy and roll this out, but we really need to have a good game plan of, okay, does it first solve its intended challenge, which sometimes we move past that, but that should always be step one, and then can it scale appropriately for someone like DPR? And then we do that really slowly, whether it's business unit by business unit, then by region, and then to the whole company. But we usually have a really well thought out game plan, working with the work groups closely associated with that tool before we roll something out. But always starts with the challenge or the opportunity, and then in parallel working on this kind of like proof of scalability stage, which is really the most important one. We usually focus on the piloting, the testing itself, and get either excited or bummed out quickly. But we need to test it on quite a few different projects and in a few different regions to understand if it will scale, and something that can be deployable.
It makes sense, and there's a feedback loop that needs to be created there to ensure that you're gathering the information as you try to do the scaling. And you're pointing out the size of DPR. DPR is obviously a very large organization, and it's a very different conversation from a $20 million general contractor in the Midwest who decides they want to use this on the 4 to 6 active projects they might have going on versus a multi-billion dollar organization. And it takes so much intention, I think, as we consider our tools and what's going to work and what isn't, but also being able to find ways to be nimble in there too, where you go, okay, it didn't what choices do we have now to either augment what we're doing to make this work, or do we have to pull the plug? And I think if you set that process up properly, if you do have to pull the plug or if you do have to make a change, it doesn't blow up the world as far as your team's workflows go. And also the culture that you've created hopefully lets them know that if you do that, you're there to support as you make those changes too. Obviously, if you've introduced a new tool and it throws off their project schedule or something, rolling in and being punitive about that when you've brought them the change isn't probably the vibe that you want to set up for the teams, especially if you want to bring them another tool later on and say, here's a new one to try. And so it's very nuanced, and I appreciate that thought. And I wanna actually dig a little bit more into this one with you, because your team is very unique, and I think it's special as far as how the structure is and how intentional it is from what you shared. So can you tell me more about the corporate innovation team that you lead and how you really are deliberately creating this environment that allows people to be innovative, especially considering the size of that team? So like, what are those steps that you're taking on a more broad level that make them know, okay, we're innovating, you have room to do this, and you're going to be safe to try new things, and we're here to catch you if it doesn't work well. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, definitely. So, right, I'll start high level, right? DPR, we have a core value of being ever forward. So we believe in continual self-initiated change, improvement, learning, and we as innovation and technology leaders really are there to again, promote and foster kind of new and innovative ideas across the company, letting them know that, hey, we have support from the top down. And that's really unique, I think, at DPR. We talk the talk and then walk the walk, right? Supporting our folks. Hey, if you think there's a better way of doing something, we want to look into that, try that out. So the innovation team specifically, we have regional leaders and then some more focus area leaders. So we have an East Coast leader, a Central leader, West Coast leader, and they support all the project teams in their region. We also have some focus area specific leaders. So we have a full-time robotics leader, full-time robotic tech implementation leader, because we think robotic tech is going to be, we're making the bet that it's going to completely change the way we perform work, and also improve kind of worker safety. And it takes a lot to test and train and get that. Again, when you're talking about deploying solutions, it takes a lot of work. So we have 2 folks dedicated to doing that. We also have a full-time field and craft leader, because half of our company are craft, and they probably know a lot more about how we actually build than the innovation team does. So we want to dig into their brains and understand what they know and what they've been thinking about, and extract these ideas, and also explore new tools, right, to make them more efficient, make them safer. So we have this team, and then we also have innovation core groups in every one of our business units. So kind of a volunteer army, right, of folks who are really passionate about finding new value with new solutions, tools, or tech. And they're kind of our eyes and ears, because we're a company of 12,000 plus, and we're a team of 7. So we're trying really to leverage the local folks who know the projects, know the project team members, and say, hey, I know this team is having either this struggle, or they have this opportunity, or they're interested in improving safety, or improving productivity, whatever it may be. They're the ones kind of connecting us to the regions. And then again, we have this whole framework for tracking our top challenges. We're tracking all the solutions available, because there's this tidal wave of new innovative tech and for construction with all the investment recently. So we're tracking the solutions, we're tracking the problems, and then when we prioritize what problems we actually want to dive into, we either have the list of solutions already that we can hopefully partner with, or try to develop something internally if we have a great idea from our craft or from some of our project teams. And we also, we're growing our kind of R&D aspect of this, where, if we have an idea or a product that we think could be a game changer, we want to dive into that and develop that further, and really see the value. But we try to kind of have this mix of strategic and experimental innovation, right, where we need strategic input from the company on what we need to go tackle, but there is that experimental side. We want to leave that open for folks. I think the robotics side, there's a lot of these, hey, we don't know what we don't know with what we can do with robotics. But if we can remove workers from harm's way, if we can supplement their work, if we can train them to be operators, give them new skills, there's a lot of opportunity there. So we're trying to have this mix of strategic and experimental innovation. And we also want to be kind of partners, not customers, with external vendors, right? Because we don't want to just be a check and get a solution. We want to work with them to develop solutions that can best tackle not only DPR's problems but the industry's problems.
There's a broad relationship, I think, with the folks that are creating the solutions that fit into the construction industry and the learnings that we can have there, and ensuring that we create that feedback loop from the people that are making those solutions. And Autodesk, I believe, does a very nice job of this in ensuring that we're creating tools that do fit the needs and solve the problems of the folks that we're serving and supporting as a company. And I've seen a lot of startups, not even necessarily in the construction space, where they create a tool that solves a problem that the customer doesn't have. And that's a weird fit where it's like we're 60% of the way there, and you've got to listen to be able to fix it, to fill that 40% gap. So I appreciate that perspective. But you've pointed out something that I think is also really interesting when you consider the size of DPR organization that's similar, and you start leaning deeper into specialization in a way that smaller organizations don't necessarily see or have the privilege of really bringing folks in with that very focused expertise. And it was a weird shift for me, if I'm being honest, when I went from working from smaller companies as more of a generalist, both in the construction industry and also in the technology side of things when I joined PlanGrid, and then we were later acquired by Autodesk. And it's an interesting shift in how you think as an individual that is working on that team, and also the impact in the work you're doing. And some folks obviously want to have that generalist role where they get to touch everything and work on everything else. But I think as the team grows in size, the importance of bringing people in who can focus on that very specific skill set that they bring to the table, or a very specific area of work that they're supporting to support the broader team, is incredibly important. And I think it also brings tremendous value. And so it's really cool to hear you talk about how you're doing this very intentionally, and also making sure that you're bringing the knowledge of all of those folks who are out there doing the building and have these skilled backgrounds to the table, so you're learning from them, because not every company has such a broad approach to self-performing work as DPR does. And I think it's increasing right now. I think we're seeing more and more of it. And obviously that's one way that folks are tackling some of this uncertainty into the market, is they bring more of these skilled folks into their team, because you bring them with you from project to project, you learn from them, you build that out. And it's a unique situation, but I think it's an incredibly impactful one, and one that DPR, from what I understand, has been doing for a very long time now, which is impressive.
I think we can't afford not to do that for us. I mean, we've been able to move the needle a lot further when we've specialized, right? Because even when we had the more generalist, the broad approach, and we validated some solutions, even after validating solutions and showing that they work, showing that they improve certain processes or a whole workflow, it's pretty hard to, again, then get adoption for that. So having folks who really are subject matter experts, and even our regional leaders who support multiple business units, they have their areas of focus, their areas of expertise, where they can go in and they can talk to robotics, they can talk to augmented and virtual reality, they can talk to visual planning, they can talk to quality, right? Where they're not only overseeing testing, overseeing validation of these solutions, but then they're able to go and they're able to train folks up, really explain why project teams should adopt and use and try these out. So we think it's crucial. Once we've kind of shifted, and we're continually evolving, right, our process, and it may change in another year or two, but really focusing in on these certain areas has allowed us to make a lot more progress than just trying to have our toes dipped in every single pool, right?
And that willingness to change, I think, is a key aspect as well, because we all have to recognize that the market is continuing to change. The innovations that are brought to the table are differing. And if you build your plan and you go, this is it forever, you're not nimble enough to be able to adapt when the market changes. So it sounds like you've got a fantastic approach and a really cool team. And I appreciate you just sharing it, because I hope others can learn from that as they continue to scale and, aspire to be an organization of the, the impact and the size of DPR. So I appreciate the perspective there. And I've got two final questions for both of you now. So I'm a big technology nerd, and I know both of you happen to dance in that space as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about each of your favorite industry trends, and also, share a prediction or two about what might be coming in the next 5 or 10 years. And so, Atul, could you kick us off with that one?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to not mention artificial intelligence and machine learning as a big trend. I think we are at a interesting crossroads in the industry where a lot of what I would say sort of wasteful processes could be automated using that. So I think my prediction is for sure in the next 5 years, it's going to be mainstream into the products that we are currently using. That's going to help improve the outcomes, help improve people's productivity, and I'm seeing some examples of that already, out here on the expo floor and other places too. So that's one. Yeah.
I love it. And Tim, how about you? What's your favorite trends or predictions for the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think obviously just by the makeup of our team, we're hedging our bet on robotics for sure, supplementing our crafts, removing them from harmful conditions. I mean, we like to think big and crazy, and we want to take construction to the moon and space, and I think robotics is going to be big for that. We're obviously focusing domestically here first, but I think robotics is going to be huge. Also, kind of augmented and virtual reality. It's been around for a while, but I think we're only scratching the surface of what it's going to allow us to do once kind of the hardware catches up. I think the software is there, but allowing data to be readily accessible. Think smart visors, smart glasses, where everything's just right in front of you. I like think about if you're building with Legos and could see exactly where the next Lego piece needs to go instead of looking at the paper and looking at the instructions. I think we could do that for building. And we're not quite there yet. We're only scratching the surface, but I see a huge potential in AR, VRs in addition to robotics.
And the technology there is just changing so dramatically at such a rapid pace. I mean, look back 5 years ago when you put a VR headset on, especially one that was more in the affordable range. In my experience, we were using it mostly for demoing what somebody's building might look like in the proposal stage and interview stage. You go, hey, you want to go with us? This is what we're going to build you. It's going to look like, and everybody in the room puts it on and goes, ooh, ah, and everything you're talking about now. This is starting to become reality. And I always encourage folks, if they looked at AR, VR, and the hardware that was behind it, 5, 6 years ago, even 3 years ago, it's worth taking another look, because the improvements have been dramatic. And I think obviously, as you said, sometimes there's some areas where there's some work to do, and we'll have to figure out where we can effectively and most efficiently deploy that technology. But it is cool tech, and I think it's going to have a big impact in the coming years. So I love that prediction as well. So one final question for each of you today. Atul, what is one tool that you will always use on every project you're working on? What's your favorite tool?
So I would say iPad, just because it allows us to bridge the gap that I've seen between the trailer and the field, and how impactful it has been in the lives of our builders, our superintendents, and our foremen. So that's my favorite tool.
I love that. And I'm a little biased because the invention of the iPad, I think, was what pushed PlanGrid into becoming a thing, and is ultimately responsible for me sitting in front of both of you today. So I like that answer very much. Tim, how about you? What's one tool you'd bring to all your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I probably had 20 different answers to this question, and I was really struggling, but then I realized I was blinded a bit by my role as with innovation and always thinking about the big shiny objects. And sometimes it's the real simple tool that's the best one. And my favorite tool is a good old pocket knife. both in construction and at home, is I'm a big DIYer, is I always have a pocket knife on me. And it's a little sore subject because I had it in my pocket when I got to the airport coming out to AU, and they confiscated it. I lose about probably a quarter because I keep forgetting that. I always have it in my pocket. It's a tool.
What do you mean I can't break this on the airplane?
It's a tool I have on my person at all times, whether it's in personal life or in construction, and I always need it. So it's the simple, tried and true, tested pocket knife. It's always good for me.
I like it though. It's straightforward, but there's so many use cases for it, and I think especially our folks that are out in the field more regularly, I likely resonate very deeply with that. And I can just think of so many times that I'm like trying to open a box or anything where I'm like hunting through my house because I don't want to use my kitchen knives to open a package or something. And so strategically locating either razor blades or knives, or smartly having one in your pocket, I think it's a great plan. So I like it. That's a good answer too. So gentlemen, thank you again for joining me today on Digital Builder. I really appreciate all the knowledge and expertise that you shared here. And, I'm encouraged by the excitement that we're experiencing here at Autodesk University today. And for everybody that's out there listening, of course, this is Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. We are a video first show. So if you are not sitting in front of me right now, make sure you head over to the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel, because you can watch all of our backlog there. All of our recent episodes are captured in video. In addition to that, of course, we are a podcast. So we are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you might find that. And if you'd like to follow me, of course, I am on Twitter on builder_digital, or alternatively, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Eric Thomas that works for Autodesk. And finally, if you are enjoying the show and you could take just a minute to rate us 5 stars and whatever player you're listening to, I would be very grateful, because it does make a big difference. And on that final note, goodbye.